Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to be digging up my dahlia tubers, which you can see I already have the tuber in my hand. Basically, I started filming this video yesterday and I accidentally deleted the first clip which explains everything that I'm doing. So I'm going to record that again right now so that you know what I'm doing. We'll flip back to some videos from yesterday and then I will continue on with what I'm doing today. So what I'm doing is my first attempt at overwintering my dahlia tubers. This was the first year I've grown dahlias in containers that survived, so I want to test out a few different ways to overwinter them. So I had 2 dahlia plants. I'm going to test out 2 different methods. I went online, since this is my first time ever trying this, and there were so many different recommendations for overwintering your tubers. So that's why I figured it'd be kind of fun to do a little test and see how each of these methods performs. Before I get into the specifics, in case you aren't familiar with dahlias and whether or not you should move them inside to overwinter them or not, typically if you're in zones 8 to 10, you're fine treating your dahlias as perennials, leaving them in the ground. They should come back just as you normally would every year with any other type of perennial. If you're in zone 7, it's kind of back and forth. If you have a warmer winter, you're going to be good. If you have a colder winter, they might not make it. So you might want to put them inside just to be safe. And then 6 and lower, which I'm in Chicago, so we are 5/6, I definitely have to overwinter them inside. So if you're in a colder climate, you can either treat them as annuals and just get rid of the dahlia tubers and start with fresh ones the next year, or you can attempt to overwinter them. I only have 2, so this should be a pretty quick method or attempt at overwintering them. Not a ton of work that has to go into it compared to if I had 20, 50, 100 dahlia tubers. So now I'll get into a little bit about what I'm going to do. The first one, I'm going to dig up the tuber and I'm going to store it in some very slightly damp vermiculite and keep it in the garage over winter. The other method is even easier. I'm keeping it in the container and just leaving it until next year and seeing if it grows back. So the reason I wanted to try these different methods out is because there is a benefit to each of them. So the benefit of keeping it in the container is just ease, simplicity. Cut off the stems, leave it where it is. I will be checking the moisture about once every month just to make sure the soil isn't completely dried out, and I might give it a little bit of water, might not. We do have a slightly more humid climate here than other areas, so I don't even know if I'll have to water it, but it is still important to check on it. The other method, the benefit of actually taking the tubers out, is one, I can check the tuber to see if anything looks rotten. So if any of the tubers are rotten, you do want to cut those off because that can spread to the rest of the tuber. Whereas the ones still in the container, you don't really know what's going on there. The other thing is that you can divide it if you take it out, which I had no idea when I made the decision how much larger these tubers have gotten. So I will be dividing this in the spring, but obviously if you keep it in a container, you're not going to be able to divide that tuber. So I am interested just to see how this does. Obviously I won't know the results until next spring, but I figured it would be fun to try both options out and see how it goes. So with that, I will now jump to the clips from yesterday and then we'll pop back into what I need to do with this tuber today. So here's a closer look now at the dahlia plants themselves, and you want to wait for about the first heavy frost in order to kill the stems and the leaves. So there still is a pretty good amount of green, but especially on this one, if you look up close at the leaves and the tinier stems, those have turned black and brown. So you want to make sure the frost has killed everything or almost everything, but not cold enough that it's going to actually destroy the tuber down here. And I think we're kind of at a good place right now. We overall had an abnormally warm fall in general, but we've had snow now a couple days, even though, again, like I mentioned, today is 60 degrees, so it's just been kind of up and down, but I think this is a good point to go ahead and actually remove the plants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically cut back the stems until a couple inches above the soil on each of these. So both the one that I'm going to store in the container and the one that I'm going to be removing the tuber. And so I'm not sure if my hand pruners will work there, so I've also brought out the larger shears as well. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these now. So the tops now have been removed. There's just a few inches left above the soil, and I might give these another trim in a little bit as well. So there's the two of them, and then there's all of the dahlias. And I think this was the hardest one to remove just because they did so well throughout the season and they lasted so long. So that one's staying in the container. This one, I'm gonna go grab some gloves and we will take out the tuber and have a look. I've actually decided to remove this tuber instead, only because the other one looks a little bit cleaner on top. So I think that'll be better to leave in the container. This one I'm going to remove the tuber. Now the tubers are very delicate, so you want to make sure you're handling them as gently as possible so you don't damage them. If you are burying these in the ground and trying to get them out, you want to use like a gardening fork and then start a little further away and go under and grab the tuber. I am going to use my hands, but still be kind of gentle, and I don't know how easy this is going to be, so let's go ahead and find out. I've gone ahead and cleaned off, well, most of the dirt. It had been raining the last few days, so if I was doing this in dry soil, it would have been a lot less dirty when I pulled it out, but I cannot believe the size of this. I think when I planted it, I don't have any video, I don't think I have a photo, but I'm pretty sure the whole tuber was about that size. So this is incredible how much growth there is on here. So next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry for about a day or two in a covered place away from sun and moisture. So that's going to be in the garage because it's definitely going to be moist out here, so I'm not going to be able to leave it outside. So I'm going to take it in the garage. Same thing with the one in the container, and then let them dry out, and then I'll follow up as far as next steps with you in about a day or two. So slight change of plans for the one in the container. I'm actually going to let it dry out in here because what's the point of having a covered and protected greenhouse if I'm not going to use it? So this I'm going to leave in here for the next day or so. I'm not going to store it in here over winter completely because I don't think, based on the reviews I read, that this greenhouse will keep it warm enough for it to survive the winter. So I'll bring it in to the garage for overwinter storage, but for now, to dry out a little bit, I'm just going to leave it in here with all the rest of these guys. And I'm glad I got this size greenhouse even though it was larger than I thought, because I've already pretty much filled it to the brim down here. Okay, so where we are right now is I've cleaned off this tuber pretty good. There's still some soil in the little crevices. And what I need to do is go through and check all the tubers, see if there's any that I want to remove, which there definitely are. I'm going to cut those off, and then I'm also going to cut the stems a little bit lower on here because I don't need these. The stems are basically just to handle it a bit easier, but once I put this into storage, I'm not going to need those, so I will cut it off. Something else to mention too is if you do have a bunch of tubers, you will want to label them. I only had one variety, so I'll know which ones I have when they start to grow again next spring before I plant them. So I'm going to take you up close to look at this tuber. I'll kind of show you the different parts of it, and then we'll get to removing some of the tubers from this. Then I will go ahead and show you how I'm going to store it. Here we are up close on this tuber. What I want to do is go over the different parts first of each of these tubers. So this is the body, these round parts. Then they're connected with a neck to the main stem. And then the swollen parts are the eyes, which on mine, they're kind of a little bit difficult to see. But if you see right in here, these little swollen growth points, those are going to be the eyes. When you divide your dahlia tuber, each thing that you plant, so each part of the tuber that you plant has to have a body, a neck, and an eye on it, or else it's not going to grow. Because the body is what gives the dahlia the energy, and then the eye is where the dahlia actually grows from. So it's not like I'll have however many tubers there are as individual dahlias, unless they also have an eye attached to them. You can choose to divide them right now. I'm going to wait until spring because there'll be more growth coming out of these eyes, so it'll be easier to see where they are for me to divide them. They will be a little bit harder then, so it might be a little bit more difficult to cut through, but I'm going to choose that method, again, just to make it a bit easier to see where the eyes are. So what I'm going to do now is go through here and just remove any tubers that seem a bit desiccated or rotted before I put this into storage. So for example, I already saw this one right here, just already seems like it was completely rotted away. So I'm going to take my pruners here. Oop, didn't mean to cut that. Take my pruners here, go right in and remove that. There was also this one where the tuber itself still looks pretty good, but you can see up close here, there's a little bit of the neck that's already kind of cut through, so it's not connected on there very strongly. So I'm going to remove this one as well. I'm going to do this with two hands so I don't cut any of them nearby. Got that one off, and just cleaning that up a little bit. This one here also looks like it's hanging on by a thread, so snipping that off here as well. So I'm just going to go through here, see if there's anything else that I feel like removing. Here's another little tiny one that's already rotting. Okay, so I've removed all of the tubers that seem to have, actually I found one more with an issue right here. This one is a bit squishy and doesn't seem to be connected very strongly, so taking that off as well. And then the next thing I'm just going to, actually let's take this one off too. Yep, this one was also squishy. Now what I'm going to do with the tubers removed that I don't want is just go ahead and cut the stems a bit shorter, and then we'll go ahead and get this stored for the winter. This is my storage method for this tuber that I'm going to overwinter outside of the container. So basically I have this plastic basket with holes in it just so that we have some airflow. I've layered it with burlap, and then in the burlap I have vermiculite. So I'm using this method that I got from the Garden Answer videos. Now she lives in a climate that is much drier than the climate here. So whereas she dampened the vermiculite, I'm just going to lightly spray it because I'm expecting to have more humidity where we're going to store it, and I would rather not get it too moist because I feel like it's easier to add moisture if I realize I need to later than it is to try to take moisture away. So essentially what I'm just going to do right now is I'm going to spray the vermiculite lightly. I'm also going to lightly spray the tuber itself. Then I'm just going to set the tuber in here. I'm going to need to add a little bit more vermiculite, it looks like, because I really want this to be covered. So let me go grab my bag of vermiculite really quick. I've ended up just adding a rubber band to the top here because I think this container could have been a little shorter and deeper, and then that would have used the vermiculite instead of having it to be so wide. It would cover the tuber completely. So by kind of pulling these corners together, now the tuber is covered, but there's still plenty of airflow going through here. So now both of my tubers are ready for storage. I'm going to put them in the garage. You want to shoot for an area that is obviously out of the elements, so you don't want to put it outside unless it's in somewhere covered, and you also don't want it to be too warm because you want the tubers to stay dormant. So shoot for somewhere between like 40 to 50 degrees. So I'm going to go and store these in the garage. It seems like the perfect place. I am going to make a note to check on them. I'm probably going to check once every 2 weeks at first, just to make sure, especially with the one in vermiculite, that I did put enough moisture in there. And then once I feel like that they're in a pretty good state, I'll probably just go and check once a month. And I'll just put a reminder in my phone so that I don't forget about them, because it's very likely that I would. But I think that's everything for today's video. Obviously, I will follow up in the spring, and I will show you if either of these methods worked or if I just have to go to the store and get more dahlia tubers, which I'm going to do anyway for next year. So thank you all so much for watching. If you have overwintered your dahlia tubers in the past, let me know the methods that you used, and I will see you in the next video.